Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and I'm here today at the British Royal Armouries taking a look at some of the interesting silenced pistols in their extensive reference collection. And today we have a Bulgarian Makarov that has a somewhat novel slide locking mechanism on it. Now, I've been doing a series on a bunch of suppressor-ready military firearms, military pistols, from like the Cold War era. And it's really fascinating how many different mechanisms that there were for adapting pistols to use with silencers beyond just having a threaded barrel and sticking the silencer on the end. Now, this particular example, as best I can tell, is not an official factory or military conversion. It is something that was done by a specific dealer slash manufacturer, I think actually here in the UK, but I've seen pictures of at least one other, so I know they were done in at least some sort of quantity, and the locking mechanism here is kind of interesting. So I figured this would be a neat one to take a look at, even though it is not an official Bulgarian military pattern. Now, before we go any further, I do want to point out the whole purpose of a slide lock on a suppressed pistol like this is to significantly reduce the noise. On especially a blowback pistol, the suppressor is going to increase back pressure on the system. It's essentially going to increase, you could say, increase the power of the cartridge in terms of its recoil and the velocity that it generates in the slide, which means even if you have pretty good suppression on the bullet going out, you're going to have a lot of high pressure gas popping out the action when that case extracts from the chamber. So being able to lock the slide forward and essentially fire the gun as a manually operated single shot pistol is going to substantially reduce the noise. Even if it's very well suppressed and it's just the clack clack of the slide operating, that's really actually louder than a lot of people realize that it is. So that's why when you see the classic, really serious, covert suppressed pistols, guns like the British Welrod, they're all manually operated. It's, in addition, it means you don't leave cartridge casings behind if you don't want to, but it really does significantly increase how quiet they are. Now, this particular system is set up so that you can fire the gun suppressed either with the slide locked or without, which is kind of cool. So this began life as a standard Bulgarian factory Makarov. You can see the slide and frame markings right there. Everything back here is normal. In fact, everything about this gun is normal except for the trigger guard. Now, on the Makarov, this is a separate piece because you have to pull it out and lock it open like this to disassemble the gun. So in theory, this could be a factory modification, except when I look at the details, elements like this spring, just it's not quite square and parallel. It does not look like factory work. There is no factory record of this sort of modification being made. And then when you look at where these guns were actually acquired, specifically this one at the Royal Armouries, it's not from any sort of military source. So the other modification, of course, besides, you don't have to have a slide lock to suppress a pistol, but you do have to have a threaded barrel of some sort. So this barrel has been replaced by a threaded one that has actually a very long threaded section there. It's still in 9x18 Makarov. This is just a fairly generic suppressor or silencer. It is a wipe-based one, so if you look inside there, you can see a jagged, ragged hole. Same here. The concept with a wipe-based suppressor is you have a series of solid rubber baffles, sometimes with a hole in the center or pre-scored with a little cross. And the bullet actually physically breaks through those. And the idea being they're rubber, they will actually close behind the bullet to a greater or lesser extent. That helps trap gas inside the body of the suppressor, and that reduces the amount of noise. It reduces the final pressure when the gas eventually comes out the end. These are absolutely quieter than baffle-based suppressors. The downside is those wipes have obviously a very limited lifespan, because once you fire more than a few rounds, you start making a permanent bullet-sized hole in the wipe, and then it doesn't close around the bullet anymore. And then you typically end up with a suppressor that's louder than a baffle suppressor. So for the really serious clandestine, like the Secret Service assassination sort of pistols, you'll typically see wipe-based suppressors because they don't anticipate any large volume of shooting. If you want the most effective overall suppressor these days, you would typically want a baffle-based suppressor that has a single wipe at the end. I should also note the other downside of wipes is they will impact your accuracy, because going through that baffle is going to deflect the bullet unpredictably. So your accuracy is not as good as a purely baffle wipe-based suppressor. Anyway, generally for the best combination of reduced noise and longevity, you get baffles with one wipe at the end. This is further complicated a bit in the United States by the fact that ATF has implemented some restrictions on wipes, deeming them suppressor parts. That's a subject for a separate video, but it means we don't generally get many wipe-based suppressors on the commercial market in the US, or suppressors of any kind that have wipes in them. All right, but back to the gun, because what you guys came here for was this interesting locking mechanism. So essentially what has been done here is to add this lever to the front of the gun. And when it's in this position, it's being locked out. We have a little spring that's holding this lever down, and that then does nothing to the pistol. So I can cycle the slide just fine. The pistol will operate as a semi-automatic. If I come in here and push this lever in and disconnect it from that spring, well, there's a spring inside here that's pushing on this lever that's going to push it up. So there's a spring down here pushing against that pivot pin. It rotates this lever up, and now when we put it back in place, that lever is sticking up inside the action, and the slide can only move this far back, and then it's going to hit that lever and stop. Now, this far back isn't really going to matter. You're not going to get any gas escaping out the breech here because the cartridge case is never going to actually extract out. It's going to come back that far and stop, but it will maintain its seal, and all your gas will be forced out the suppressor, thus keeping the gun as quiet as possible. Then, when you will obviously need to re-engage this. So we pull that spring down, pull this back, like so, to allow the slide to fully cycle. After the first shot, you have to do that so that you can get the empty case out of the pistol. You could then fire a second suppressed shot as a semi-auto and have it cycle on its own, have a little more noise, or you could go back in here, do that again, relock the pistol, and fire again. So it's not the most user-friendly, it's not the most ergonomic system, but it is a very simple system to make, to actually modify to an existing Makarov pistol, because all you have to do is replace this trigger guard assembly. Notice, another reason I don't think this is really factory is that this pivot pin for the locking bar it's starting to walk out a bit. Factory design would have done that a little bit better. Anyway, a factory design also probably would have had a better mechanism for allowing you to easily cycle the pistol. The other element that is relevant to suppressing a pistol, or really any firearm, is the speed of the projectile. If your bullet is traveling supersonic, it's going to make a supersonic crack that no suppressor can prevent. So you will often see in guns like the MP5SD and others copied from its sort of style, you'll see vented barrels that reduce the gas pressure when a cartridge fires to prevent that cartridge from breaking the sound barrier. 9mm Makarov is sort of an interesting cartridge in that in its standard normal form, it's basically transonic. Its velocity is hitting right at about that 1100 foot per second mark. That is usually going to be subsonic, but sometimes supersonic. The speed of sound actually varies depending on a variety of factors like air density, which depends on altitude and humidity and temperature and various other things. So a gun like this is usually going to be subsonic, but you may get the occasional supersonic crack depending on where it's being used. And there was no mechanism in this to change that. Well, if you're interested in this sort of military-style suppressed pistol, I do have a bunch of other videos on other examples. Guns like the Polish PT-83, the Czech CZ, a VZ-70 pattern specifically designed with a slide lock mechanism for a suppressor, or some of the more common ones like the Makarov PB. Anyway, you can check out all of those videos. I'll have links in the description text below. Big thanks to the British Armouries, the Royal Armouries, for giving me access to this example to film for you guys. Hopefully you enjoy the video. Thanks for watching.